That's what I was thinking. I was just like, thank you, Lord.
Yeah, we thank God for this.
A map.
How does this verdict affect a civil case?
It doesn't affect the civil case. I mean, the fact that, well, it does in the sense that Mr. Bates has been found guilty of his actual conduct. I mean, the case, though, is not only about Mr. Bates' conduct, but it's about why he was allowed to be there to begin with. Why was he allowed to make all of these donations and pay to play to be a police officer and use a non-certified weapon on the scene to shoot Eric Harris? Those issues with the falsification of records and the culpability of not only Mr. Bates in that process, but the sheriff's office and allowing him to be there. And so there's a lot of information that we had hoped would come out during the trial. It didn't come out for whatever reason. The jury still found the ridiculousness of the defendant's argument. The idea that a bright yellow taser that doesn't look anything like a .357 snub-nosed revolver, he was confused about. And then on top of that, the absurdity that he just happened to have a heart attack in the middle of all of this transpiring. It gave me, I've always believed that juries are really good at getting it right. And you always have concerns as a lawyer. You know, when we had an all Caucasian jury, right? There were a lot of older people on that jury, but it renewed a sense that I've really always had in the jury process, which is juries generally get it right.
That's right.
And so they did that in this case. The charge itself was somewhat watered down, in my opinion, with the manslaughter 2 charge. Really what we're talking about is this guy who's behaving in a reckless disregard, as opposed to just, you know, like, it was sloppy work. It was reckless for him to be there. It was reckless for him to put himself at that sheriff's office to really carry out, in our opinion, were his own pleasures in serving in that capacity. And so the case is going to continue on. There's so much information that the public doesn't know about, that the media doesn't know about, that I hope will come out, and I know will come out through the process of the civil rights case.
You're planning on putting the system on trial, basically.
Sure, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, we're talking about systematic deficiencies in the sheriff's office that were allowed to exist. Not, you know, we made a mistake. I mean, they were the top leaders. When have you ever seen a sheriff's office or a police department the size of this one? I mean, Tulsa's not a huge city, but it's also not a small town, where the head guys were threatening the subordinate employees to let Bob Bates play, to let Bob Bates have his car decked out with radios and lights, to let Bob Bates go on the drug task force with the father-son team who vacationed with him. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. And it's rare that you can actually capture it when it happens and then expose it, because they're in control of all the evidence. They control what's in that property room. They controlled what was going to be said in this trial. And I felt like at times it was like watching someone prosecute themselves. I mean, you had the Tulsa County DA's office prosecuting essentially an employee of the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, or at least he was acting as such. And so I was really happy that the jury was able to see through that and convict him. Again, I think that if the jury had heard the full, I think they would have been shocked with the information that a lot of it's come out and some of it hasn't.
And Dan, if you could
Yeah, sure.
here, what does this do for your pending civil rights case?
I think that what it does is essentially you've got a finding, okay, with Mr. Bates as far as his actions. And in the civil rights case, what we're looking at is, were the actions of the officer unreasonable under the circumstances? Were his actions, did he act in deliberate indifference to Harris's constitutionally protected rights to be free from being shot in the middle of the street? And clearly this jury says yes, his actions did. Then, so that's part of an element that you have to prove in the civil case.
But had you ever heard an argument saying a man who was shot was not killed by a bullet, but by a heart attack from previous condition? Had you ever heard, and I'm being serious, had you ever heard a type of argument like that?
No, I mean, of course not, and I think that it's offensive. I think it was a mistake. I think it was a huge mistake for the defense to come in and try to argue. I mean, if you're looking at it, if I'm just sitting back and looking at the situation, because it's so insulting to the jury. When someone says, look, it was this random heart attack that just happened to strike within the minutes of him being shot, what that does is everything else you've done during the trial is questioned because of those obvious falsities. I mean, everyone knows that that's not true. You don't need experts to tell you that. But the fact that they're so adamant about it it makes you question everything else that they say. And it was a huge mistake. It was offensive to the family, and I think the jury thought that as well. I mean, that would be, as a juror, I don't care if you're white or black or 60 or 26, it's offensive. And Eric Harris, yeah, he shouldn't have had a gun. I mean, he was a convicted felon. He shouldn't have had a gun. He shouldn't have been out there that day. They had encouraged him to come out there and sell narcotics to them. They had encouraged him to come out and sell a gun. They asked him. It wasn't like Eric was out there contacting these guys, you want to buy a gun, you want to buy a gun. I mean, these guys were doing setup. This was a sting operation where they had induced him into doing this. That's right. Right?
That's right.
He doesn't see a single uniformed officer when those guys come up on that car. And he runs. He doesn't know if, I mean, they're sitting there acting like, of course he knew it was the sheriff's office. There wasn't a marked car. There wasn't a patrol officer out there with a uniform on. There were no lights until he's halfway down the street.
Even though they won, do you feel the prosecution did a good job of the case?
Look, I hate to sit back and and judge other lawyers and the behavior. My concern with this is that you had the county prosecuting the county, which means that the district attorney, when the district attorney gets up there, and let's say he had decided to bring up the training records, and he says to somebody, you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that Mr. Bates' training records were falsified? That district attorney is an employee of Tulsa County who is named in a civil rights lawsuit. That is an admission by an employee of the county when the DA says it. And so,
Helps your case.
well, yeah, of course it does. And they know that it establishes that liability above and beyond just Mr. Bates' actions, right? When you're talking about supervisors knowing that the records were falsified and he's still allowed to go out there, that, in my opinion, is what the case should have been about, right? But at the end of the day, I feel so lucky and blessed, the family got a good verdict in this situation. And I think that with, again, I think it was a diluted charge. I think it was a slam dunk case. I think they shouldn't have to spend 3 days chasing around crazy medical, but they did, and they still got a conviction. And so I'm happy that, because it wasn't easy to get the DA to file a charge in this case.
No.
It took a lot of community involvement, which should not happen.
Brewster said that the media attention hurt his client. What do you think the media attention did for the prosecution?
Well, Mr. Brewster had every opportunity to let his client talk to the media. He didn't let him do that, except early on when they went on, a limited show where I'm sure they knew what the questions were going to be. Mr. Brewster had an equal amount of access to the cameras. I mean, he's been in front of cameras for his whole career. So if his client is that innocent and he's worried about the media, let his client explain why he's so innocent. I mean, put the client on the stand, let him say, look, I thought someone was going to get killed, and I shot my gun. I didn't mean to, whatever he's going to say. I think the media attention has been more than fair in this case. I really do. And I think in a community where you just don't ever get people standing up for things like this, to finally see it happen, I think Mr. Brewster's just mad it happened.
Yeah, that's right.
I think he'd rather just people continue to be quiet and not say anything about injustice.
Teamwork makes the brain work.
But you see that separation from like that mentality when he's talking to the jury. He views, I think there's a disconnect between what the majority of people in society view and maybe what he views. I mean, he called Bob Bates a hero in his closing argument. I don't think that is consistent with what the community would believe and what the evidence would show.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, news media.